Hey, everybody. Welcome to Buffalo Plus and the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Mike Catalana along with Dan Fetes. Playoff time, Dan. We're ready for it, right? Trying to get everybody set for what we think we're going to see on the field Saturday afternoon, Bills against the Colts. All right, if you're looking at this Colts team in comparison to the Bills, I would say the Bills have been very, very consistent in the second half of the year, meaning they've been really good just about every week. The Colts, when they're good, they're pretty good. And when they're not good, they can fall apart a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of look at the Bills are playing their best football now and how much they've struggled early on in the year, Mike. The first thing I look into this game is we've talked all about the Colts running game. Jonathan Taylor, offensive rookie of the year, all of these things, this running attack that can really neutralize the Bills offense. But, Mike, you pointed out well, on the podcast and other things we've done this week, you kind of got to have a lead to have a running game be effective. So, to me, Brian Daboll has been really, really good at engineering opening drives. Now, like I said, it didn't work well against Miami, but in other games, they've scored on their first 5 possessions. I think that is huge. We saw what he did against Houston last year where he marched them down the field. It was like he could have ran for president in Buffalo after the last, that drive in Houston. So to me, that's a big start, is getting off to a hot start to try and neutralize the running game of the Colts.
Yeah, and when you look at that Colts defense, I found some numbers that I think people are going to find interesting because sometimes when you look at the entire year, there are certain numbers, right? And then when you break them down, how about this? First 10 weeks of the year, they were giving up just under 200 passing yards a game. It's 300 for the games since the 10th game of the year, so 11 to 16. Touchdown to interception ratio. First 10 games, 11 to 11, and they had 21 sacks. Second part of the year, 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and they've only gotten 13 sacks. So while the numbers in total are still pretty really solid for them, I think that sort of says something a little bit too. Now, look, they had 2 guys make all-pro first team. They're really good.
They had 5 or 6 altogether.
They had the second most on the first team. Yeah.
Yeah, they had the second. They were tied for the most with the Packers. So you look at the Bills in the day that they obviously had on Friday with Stephon Diggs and then Allen Beasley, Trey White, and Andre Roberts. And you're like, wow, 5 guys in the all-pro team. It's like the Colts have more guys.
Yeah.
So
it is. You're right. And they do. But there's having star players and there's having guys who are the best at their position.
Right.
And then there's having that team. Like it's one thing to say that the Bills have all pro guys like Beasley getting it this year, which I be honest with you, I love Beasley. I was a little bit surprised named to an all pro team, but Stephon Diggs' numbers are so good. I went through the Colts numbers and they have competent wide receivers, guys like T.Y. Hilton, right? They catch the ball. Their numbers are like a decent number 2 wide receiver going down the list, right? The John Brown numbers, and Beasley a little bit above them. But Stephon Diggs' numbers are so superior to anybody on the Colts. You have to add up 3 wide receivers to get to what Diggs has done. So there's being a Pro Bowl player, and then there is being a spectacular player, and that's what Diggs has been.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, Mike, I know you have more numbers. You said you had more numbers too, because the one thing that stands out for me, and I'll go first, now as we kind of shift to the Colts offense.
Yeah.
Phillip Rivers, games under 32 degrees. He's played 6 of them. He's 1-5 all time. Ooh. He is going to be bundled up. He's going to have like 2 hoodies on, freezing in the 29-degree weather that the Bills are going to think it's going to be a picture-perfect day in Buffalo.
Yeah, that's not going to help him. Obviously, he played out west in San Diego or LA his career, and then now in a dome. The other thing I noticed about the Colts this year was against good teams, because that's what you want to see, right? Yep. It's like make the baseball comparison. I mean, the Yankees have been a team that is built on over 162 games, forgetting last year. You just beat up teams because of your lineup. But when you get to the playoffs, they're good teams, right? So, the Jaguars are gone, right? The Jets are gone for the Bills. Like, they don't have those teams. Playoff teams, the Colts were 3-4. Okay, that's not terrible when you look at it. They split with the Titans.
Yep.
They beat the Vikings, and they beat the Packers. Now, that's their good win. They got the win against the Packers. They lost to the Titans, Ravens, Browns, and Steelers. But what I really noticed about those games was how they did against the top quarterbacks. Like, they beat Rodgers. He threw for 311 and 3 touchdowns.
I was about to say, I thought Rodgers had a pretty good day that week.
Yeah. Roethlisberger, coming off a terrible stretch of his career, 341 and 3 touchdowns.
Most of that in the second half.
Yes. Deshaun Watson in his 2 games. Now, they split the 2 games.
But those games were just insane.
700 and a little about 720 yards and 4 touchdowns in the 2 games against this team. Now, it was interesting, who I think Tannehill is a good quarterback. Tannehill did not have good games against them, very mediocre. Yeah. But in one game, Derrick Henry ran for 173, and in the other game, he ran for 110, and they split those 2 games. So I think the Titans took the approach of, we're going to run it, and they had success in one game and not another.
I can probably look this up too, but did the Colts split with the Texans, or was or is that the time that Watson had fumbled on the goal line? Times?
Yes.
Like
that they
could have lost both of those games against the Texans, which is, for as bad as the Texans were this year, Deshaun Watson was a top 5 quarterback in the league once again.
Yeah, and that's what I was really looking at against top quarterbacks. How did they do? Now, there are times when, guys can still put up numbers. I mean, Fitz threw for 300 against the Bills and they still won the game. I mean, that can happen too at times, but I'm looking at them against good teams and I'm looking up them against elite quarterbacks, or at least the best of the quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And, the one thing this team does do is force turnovers, and their turnover differential is good. And the key is they don't really give the ball up very much. I think they were second in the league in turnover differential. But, the Bills were +4. I mean, the Bills are not a terrible team with turnovers. My God, if they were better than that, how many points would they have scored this year? Right? I mean, that was about the only thing that on occasion slowed them down. I think it was just another excuse to keep Corey Bjorquez on the bench. I
think that was to keep him a secret so they don't have to pay him like a big contract, like all of those things. But Mike, it's interesting. You talk about the progression.
Yeah.
And I know that people still talk about, and I tweeted about it today, and it's something that I've preached, that the Bills are pretty good at taking away one side of the ball. And another thing the one thing that we talked about earlier in the year, and I was so adamant about it, was we have now seen it's not a 4-game sample. It's not a 5-game sample. It's a year-long sample of what this Bills offense has done. And they can dictate what they want to do. The Bills offense, I talked about early on, getting off to a hot start. The Bills offense can neutralize the Colts running game. They can make it one-sided. And that's something that I've always seen recently, what good teams do. For years, the Saints and the Chiefs have been tops in the leagues in sacks. It's not because they have a great pass rushers. The Chiefs let Justin Houston just go to Indianapolis. They're like, we don't need him. Because when teams can pin their ear back, when they know teams are passing, you just get jumps. And so I look at some of those things where you go, the offense can really help your defense. But also the defense with Buffalo has really stepped up. As we've talked about, they were so criticized earlier in this year, and rightfully so. They weren't very good. They were winning games 36-30 and all of those things. Weeks 1 through 9, the Bills, 25th in total defense in the league. Weeks 10 through 17, they are 6th in the NFL, averaging just allowing 20 points a game. And Mike, those 20 points a game, those are with some who care touchdowns.
Yes.
Like that could be lower.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at what Tua did, they got a couple late touchdowns. That was there. Even, just some of the games, Denver put up a late touchdown. Like, this defense is playing, I can't say at their 2019, 2018 level, like that good. They're playing very good with a lot of confidence.
Well, and it's a more effective defense because the offense is so good. That's what we've said, where the offense makes them that good.
2020, you have to have a good 2021. You have to have a good offense.
Yeah, and so let's go to to game situations. Bills haven't trailed at halftime since the Kansas City game. They've rarely trailed in games. Now it is, they trailed in the New England game. They trailed in the Miami game 3-0, right? Then they came right back and they scored. They trailed in the Pittsburgh game 7-0. Then they came back, but have not been down by more than one score. They've caught up and taken the lead by halftime in every one of those games. And then they start to dominate. Both of us are picking the Bills to win the game. We think they're going to win. They're going to win in advance. But what would be a worry sign if you're sitting here? And I know Bills fans, I talked to a few today that are like, I'm just anxious. I can see why you're anxious because you haven't seen them win in the playoffs in 78 years. So give me a scenario where the Colts are in the game and the Bills could be threatened or in trouble. And I'm talking about, not the first drive of the game, but I'm talking about a third quarter, like what's happening.
Well, I think to me, it's funny because I do look at that start being so important that I really think it's on Brian Dable to really kind of draw up some things to get going. But it'd be interesting if the Colts string together a couple of 13 play, 6-minute drives. Like that would worry me, and again, my worrisome has been that the Colts offense is that death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's a 4-yard run, a 4-yard run, a 3-yard slant to T.Y. Hilton, moves the chains. And that Philip Rivers is going to sit back there in the huddle and have no worry. Because this is something we've never seen the Bills be treated like. Like they now have the offense where you're like, you got to keep Rodgers on the sideline. You got to keep Mahomes on the sideline. You got to keep him on the bench. Like if the Colts can do that, they're a veteran team. They're not explosive. This wouldn't be like the Colts taking their foot off the gas. Like I've always wanted, like when the Bills played the Chiefs.
Wait a minute. Do they ever have their foot on the gas?
No, they don't have it on the break. Oh yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, it's sort of they're coasting down a hill, and so they get moving a little bit, and then but they're not pedal to the metal.
And that's what it said. Like, Mike, we talked about when they went to play Kansas City early on in the year, Mike, and we said, go at them. Like, don't try and play this conservative game. And they did. Like, the Bills did play a conservative game and tried to neutralize Patrick Mahomes. Like, this is a game where the Colts wouldn't be changing their game plan to go, hey, let's try and control the clock. Like, that would worry me because then that's more pressure that goes on Josh, which, again, he's handled slow starts. He handled slow starts in Miami. He handled slow starts against Pittsburgh. He's handled slow starts and really kind of bounced back. And that's one thing he said he's learned is not to panic. Brian Dable has taught him, don't panic. And then all of a sudden, they have been able to flip the switch and go touchdown, 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 and the game's over. So I guess if I'm in that spot, if the Colts are chewing up first downs, they're getting 3 first downs of drive, and we're going in the second half, and it's 17-13 Indy, that's my worry.
Yeah. Well, and I'm with you. I know it sounds funny sometimes to say, but the longer the Colts stay in the game, then it becomes something. And because I believe the Bills are that team now that can just decimate a team with their offense. They can. Doesn't mean they do it every week. I mean, we saw them in that. I guess that Chargers game is the one that really sticks out because they turned it over a few times. That was an odd one because the defense actually played pretty well, and they held the star rookie in check really the whole game. And, remember teams kept turning the ball back and forth to each other. It was a weird day, but they just never were the 2020 Bills in that game where they just overwhelmed somebody. But that's the outlier. Those are the outlier games. Other than that, they've been just picking their spots and just destroying people. So I believe if they get off to that start, I don't see the Colts keeping up. I think, like I said, I think the Colts want to ugly it up as long as they can, play their toughest defense that they can play, and try to stay in the game. And then I believe the pressure comes on the Bills. But up until then, they're the better team, right?
To the better team, I think that's what, not that Sean McDermott's telling them, but he's telling them, go out and play your game. That if you go out and take care of your business, it doesn't matter if they play the underdog card. They just can't hang with you. Like they've gone from that sense of they don't, teams probably say in the locker room, they don't know what's coming. Jerry, they don't know what's coming. Trey, they don't know what's coming. Now it's like they know what's coming and it's going to happen. Like that's just it. Like play your game, Josh. Do what you have to do. And it doesn't really matter what the Colts do. That's I guess my only fear. And we talked about how the Colts can win this game. And if they play, we talked with Andrew. Sorry, Mike.
Calhoun.
Yes, thank you.
Anthony Calhoun. Yep.
Anthony Calhoun, and said that the Colts need to play nearly perfect to win this game, especially on offense. Even if they play perfect, I still think the Bills need to give them breaks. I still think the Bills need to shoot themselves in the foot. Yeah. They need to have penalties. They need to have illegal formations. Like all of those things that can happen, but they haven't done it much this year.
My way of thinking, I'm with you on that, is the longer the Colts play well and stay in the game, I'm not saying doubt. I'm not saying losing confidence. I'm saying it's gone pretty well for the Bills lately. And you don't want in your head to be thinking, oh boy, we did blow the playoff game last year. It's tight now. But again, look at what's happened. Look at last year. That's what happened to the Ravens. 10 wins in a row, came in rolling, MVP, and Lamar can run, but last year he threw it well too. And they got in the playoffs and got run down. And even the Chiefs started the playoffs off terribly. It can happen to teams. So I think this Bills team is ready. I think the fans, while there's only 6,700, is going to be a nice little jolt for them to get them going. Obviously it's not going to impact the Colts that much. I mean, they're going to be able to snap the ball. Right. I don't think that's going to be a problem. We know fans are very enthusiastic, but I don't think you can be quite that loud with only 6,700. But I think it's going to be that type of game. So we've both got the Bills winning. I think you had them covering, right?
I had them covering 30-20. It's 6.5 point spread. Sean McDermott has been a touchdown favorite 8 times since coming to Buffalo. He has won all 8 of his games. He has covered 6 out of the 8 games. So the only one he hasn't covered this year was the Jets. They were a 9.5 point favorite in New York, and they won 18-10.
Wow. I would say the Bills have been the most consistent team in the league, consistently good. I think even more so than Kansas City. Kansas City survived in a lot of games.
You can't find a bad loss from the Bills.
I think Green Bay's been pretty consistent. They had a few hiccups, but they've been pretty good in the NFC side. But in Kansas City, they won those games. I mean, Mahomes just was Mahomes, and they figured out ways to win those games. But they know they got by in some of those games. I mean, the Bills have been really good. We'll see if it continues. Real quick, since I know you're going to put out your best bets and everything, when you look at the whole slate of games, any games that stand out this weekend, people are always looking for the upset or something that isn't going to go to chalk. Anything you got out there?
Interesting. The Washington football team, 8.5 point underdogs. They are at home. Now, I know home field advantage doesn't mean much. Tom Brady, though, 1-6 in his last 7 night games. Mike, I think you can relate. Older guy, maybe he gets a little tired later at night. It is interesting. Teams that have been 8-8 or 7-9, there's only been 4 of them that have made the playoffs. 4 of them, I believe. The last 3 have all covered the spread. So, and 2 of them have won. Seattle did it, as well as Carolina has done it. So a lot of times there's been that thought of like, well, there's no way the Washington football team can win. I don't know. It seems like teams have been able to do that before. Now, granted, who's playing quarterback for them, but 8.5 points is a lot for Tom Brady.
Yeah, I think with the way Washington can play defense, I think if they put up 17 points, I think they're going to be in the game.
Yeah, very interesting, Mike. They rank 32nd in DVOA on offense.
Yeah.
They rank 3rd in DVOA on defense. The biggest discrepancy ever of a playoff team.
Yeah.
So very interesting things to think about there with that Washington football team, because they might even rotate quarterbacks between Alex Smith and Hanke.
Yeah, and Ron Rivera is probably going to make the decision. If not, I'm sure Joe Judge will decide who's going to play quarterback for the team, because he is the voice of the NFL. All right, nobody else, because I've got 2 games that I think, not big upsets, but I think can go that way.
Hit me.
One's in the NFC. I think the Rams are going to beat Seattle. They just lost to them. I think outright the Rams are going to win that game. I think that defense, when they're at their best, is really good. Mm-hmm. In the past, they've had good success against Wilson. I think they're going to get after him, and I think they're going to win the game. And the other one,
don't do it.
Your Baltimore Ravens are going to beat the Titans, and they're going to win in advance.
No comment. That game also, I haven't seen exactly what the over is. I know it's ridiculously high. Those 2 teams want to run the ball. The clock will be moving a lot of that game. Yeah. I hate unders. That's a lot of points. I saw it up at like mid-50s, maybe higher. I would like the under in that game for just too many points in a playoff game where 2 teams are going to just try and run the ball down each other's throat and keep the clock moving.
Yeah. In total, I like the 2 teams getting a bye format in the NFL. I think it rewards a team like the Bills would have gotten rewarded. The Saints would have gotten rewarded. But it is pretty cool to have 6 playoff games over the 2 days. It's
very cool.
It's nonstop football this weekend, and the Bills lead it off with the 1 o'clock start.
53% on my best bets this year.
Look at that.
That's not necessarily pro gambler, but Mike, you don't need to worry about me finding a new profession.
Right.
But it's pretty good.
Well, it's obviously number one in Rochester.
Number one.
I mean, come on. All right. Stay here on Buffalo Plus and the YouTube page. We thank everybody who has subscribed, liked, comments, all of that. By the way, Jenna, we just gave her the day off. She deserved a day off, right?
Yeah.
She's getting ready for game day. It's a veteran rest day for her, you know.
Yeah. She's anchoring big day tomorrow.
Big day tomorrow.
Her beauty sleep.
Yeah. I'm going to get my sleep. I better go to bed now for my beauty sleep to be up at the game tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be weird. I've covered a lot of Bills playoff games, but haven't been at a home game since 96. Wow. That's a long time, but we'll see how it goes up there. Thanks to everybody for joining us, and keep looking for the content, and we will see you on game day, and we'll see what happens with the Bills. For Dan Fetes, I'm Mike Catalana. Thanks for watching.